Magandang araw sa inyong lahat and welcome once again to another recorded lecture for the subject Concepts in Pediatrics. We have already covered some of the fundamental aspects of newborn care such as Apgar scoring, thermoregulation, and even the unang yakap, which have set a solid foundation for your understanding how to provide immediate and effective care to the newborn. Today, we'll be diving deeper into the next set of essential procedures and concepts that are necessary for essential intrapartal newborn care. And these procedures include nursing and midwifery skills like establishment of respiration or ensuring the newborn has a clear airway and starts breathing independently. We will also learn how to do eye care or preventing potential infections that may arise from their exposure during delivery. You will also be learning how to perform care of the cord or proper handling and care to prevent complications and infections of the funis. And you will also learn how to prevent bleeding and understand the role of vitamin K and other measures to reduce the risk of hemorrhage in the neonate. And we will also be learning about the prevention of infection or implementing different techniques and interventions to protect the newborn from bacterial and viral exposures. And lastly, you will also learn how to take anthropometric measurements or accurately measuring the newborn's length, weight, and circumferences of the body to establish baseline health data. Now, as future healthcare professionals, nurses, and midwives, you have to remember that these procedures will play a critical role in ensuring that the newborn will not only survive but also thrive during the early months of life. So let's delve into the details of our essential intrapartal newborn care and understand the rationale behind all of these procedures. So please bring out your ball pens and notebooks and prepare your headsets para po pakinggan nyo ako ng mabuti and so that you can also follow along our lecture. So let's begin. After ensuring that the baby is already thermoregulated or kept warm and dry on the first minutes of life, our next responsibility is to establish or maintain respirations or keeping the baby's airway clear. Now, this means that we have to make sure that the baby is already breathing properly and that they have no difficulty of getting air into their lungs. Now, it is important for you to remember that if the baby is crying or pink in color, or if the baby is already breathing normally, do not suction the mouth or nose. Hindi na po kailangan na mag-suction tayo ng mouth and nose sa ating newborn babies if they are already crying or if they are already pink or they have already established normal breathing. This is because the baby can naturally get rid of mucus and other secretions on their airway on their own using what we call the extrusion reflex, which will help the baby push anything that might be blocking their own airway. In other words po, if the baby is doing well, there is no need to interfere any longer. Now, in our EINC recommendation, suctioning of the mouth and the nose should not be performed for babies with clear amniotic fluid as well, if they are already breathing on their own at birth. So hindi na lang po crying and pink with normal breathing ang ating basis for no suctioning. You also have to remember that if the baby's amniotic fluid is clear when he was born, ibig sabihin wala pong meconium staining, then that means that there is no need for suctioning. So ulitin ko ha, this means that if the amniotic fluid of the baby is clear when he was born, this means that the baby is already breathing well and there is no meconium staining or meconium aspiration, so there is no need to suction, as doing so can cause unnecessary stress and potentially harm the baby's delicate airway. So if we are not allowed to suction the baby if the amniotic fluid is clear or if the baby is crying or if the baby is pink all over, sir, anong gagawin namin? So ang gagawin nyo na lang po if the baby is crying or if the baby's color is pink, normally breathing naman yung baby and the amniotic fluid is clear, the only thing left to do is to allow the baby to breathe naturally without intervention or interference. So hindi na po kayo dapat mag-interfere or magbigay pa ng interventions because the baby is already crying or breathing on their own. So this is what I teach my students as a simple rule of thumb to determine if suctioning is necessary or not. Lagi nyo pong tatandaan yung acronym natin na CCP. Crying, clear amniotic fluid, and pink body. If all of these three are present and observable in the newborn baby, then do not do any suctioning. But if one or two or all of these are absent in the baby, then it is time to suction the baby's airway. So the only time po na magsasuction po tayo ay kung color blue yung bata, kung hindi po siya umiiyak, or kung meconium stained po yung kanyang amniotic fluid. Now, just in case that there is a need for you to suction the baby because the baby cannot initiate breathing, you can use a bulb aspirator. Okay, so the bulb aspirator is a simple tool that is used to suction out the excess mucus or fluids from a newborn's mouth and nose to help clear the airway and make breathing easier. So kunwari yung bata hindi pa siya nakakaiyak, okay, but the amniotic fluid is clear and pink naman yung katawan ng bata, but the child just has trouble initiating breathing. You can use bulb aspirator po to remove the secretions from the mouth and the nose. Now, this simple tool is helpful when the baby has a lot of secretions that could block their airway or cause difficulty of breathing. Now, if the baby has a lot of secretions, like I said, you can use a bulb aspirator to gently clear the mouth first and then proceed to the nose. So this is how the bulb aspirator looks like. Now, remember that there are also signs of mucus obstruction on the newborn, or meaning there are mucus that are blocking the airway of the baby. Now, you have to be very sensitive and very attentive of these signs and symptoms of mucus obstruction. So ano-ano nga ba yung mga signs that show that the newborn has mucus obstruction? Number one is that if the baby is not breathing. So if the baby is not breathing at all, you call for help immediately or you tell your CI para po makapag-suction na po tayo. Now, aside from that, you can also notice that the baby has gasping. Okay? Yung gumaganon yung bata, so there is gasping for air. If the baby is gasping, it also means that they are also struggling to breathe. Okay? So, aside from that, you can also check the respiratory rate of the newborn. Okay? So, the respiratory rate of the newborn normally is 30 cycles per minute to 60 cycles per minute. Pero, if the respiratory rate that you got is more than 60 breaths per minute, this means that the baby is breathing too fast, and that is also a sign of difficulty of breathing. Ang yon yung tinatawag natin na takip niya. Now, if the baby has less than 30 breaths per minute, this is also a sign of difficulty or labored breathing, and this is what we call bradypnea. And this means that the baby is breathing too slowly, which can be a cause for concern for us nurses and midwives. Now, basically makakarinig din tayo ng grunting sound, okay? So if the baby makes grunting sound while breathing, it indicates that they are having trouble getting enough air into their lungs. Meaning, nahihirapan silang magpasok ng kanilang hangin. It is very difficult for them to push down oxygen into the lungs. That's the reason why they create these grunting sounds. I will be playing a sample of the grunting sound just about now.
Your baby may grunt to keep air in the lungs. Grunting may sound like snoring or singing.
Now, marahil nagtataka kayo kung bakit ko dinidiscuss ito, yung mga signs of mucus obstruction. Now, these signs of mucus obstruction are important signals that the baby may need help with breathing due to their mucus blockage. So if you notice that any of these symptoms are present in your baby, you have to check the baby's airway and clear any obstructions if needed. So pwedeng magbigay na tayo ng quick action like a suctioning using the bulb aspirator that can help the baby breathe better and avoid serious problems. So like I said, we can now use the bulb aspirator to suction the secretions from the mouth or the nose if these symptoms or signs persist in our patient. Now, aside from that, we can also position the patient in left side lying position or right side lying position, and then we can gently rub the hand firmly on the back of the patient. So pagsikigen tayo, in Ilocano, pagsikigen, and then you gently rub the back of the baby. Now, bakit natin ginagawa ito? For correct positioning, you have to place the baby on his side, either left or right, it doesn't really matter, and then rub your hand firmly on the baby's back to help clear the airway and stimulate breathing. Because if you rub the back of the baby, you are stimulating the baby to cry. And when the baby cries, he is able to push out the lodged secretion that are blocking the airway of the baby. Now, bakit po maganda ang side-lying position with back rubbing? This position helps prevent choking and also allows the secretions to drain more easily when the baby is on side-lying position. Kasi pag in case na mag-secrete na siya ng mucus at nakahiga lang yung bata, the mucus may also enter the nose of the baby leading to aspiration. So mas maganda po yung drainage if the baby is positioned na naka-side-lying so that it prevents choking and aspiration and also allows the secretion to drain more efficiently and safely out of the mouth or nose of the baby. So that is the position for our baby and the use of the bulb aspirator. Now, it is important for you to know that crying is a sign of breathing. The surest sign na humihinga yung pasyente mo is that they are crying. Okay? So I repeat, crying is a sure sign of breathing. When a newborn cries, it's a good sign that they are already breathing and that the airway is already clear. Pero sa mga napapanood natin sa pelikula, what we see in movies is that the doctors are spanking the buttocks of the child or some of them are shaking the baby just to make them cry. Hindi po pwede yon. Okay? So we do not do those harsh things to the baby just to make them cry, just to keep them breathing. Now, crying helps the baby's lungs to expand and they take in oxygen when they cry, which means that their breathing is strong and that airway is already clear and patent. Now, ibig sabihin, kailangan pong umiyak yung bata after delivery. But that doesn't mean that we should do harsh things to the baby just to make them cry. Now, remember to never hit the baby or hold them upside down and then spank them just to make them cry. These are already outdated practices that can hurt the baby and even cause unnecessary stress and injury to the newborn. So hindi na po tayo gagawa ng mga bagay na ganon just to make them cry. Instead, we will do more gentle things to keep the baby breathing or to help them cry. So the best methods to help the baby breathe or help the baby cry is, number one, gently rubbing the baby's back. So you just use your hand to rub the back of the baby firmly and gently. Aside from that, we can also stimulate the feet of the baby. So anong gagawin natin? So light flicking, pinipitik po natin, light flicking or tickling the soles of the baby's feet. Those can be done also as a gentle way to stimulate the baby to cry and make them breathe. So, hindi na po pwede ang mag-shake-shake kayo sa mga bata or hindi na po pwede ang mag-spank kayo sa mga bata. Hindi na po pwede yon. Okay? So, there are much gentler ways of handling the baby's breathing by gently rubbing the baby's back or stimulating the feet of the baby to make them cry. These methods are safer and more effective in encouraging the baby to start breathing and crying naturally without causing them harm or causing them injury. Now, a while ago, I said that a baby will not cry if their airway has blockages or presence of secretions. Now, you have to watch out for what we call vigorous suctioning. Okay? So when using suction apparatus to clear the newborn's mouth and nose, you have to avoid vigorous suctioning. Maraskal kayo masyado na mag-suction, hindi po pwede yon. If you suction the baby too aggressively, it can irritate the mucous membrane that can make the baby's nose or even throat sore, and it can become damaged. Okay? So this irritation, because of your vigorous suctioning, can lead to small breaks. Magkakasugat-sugat po yung kanyang skin or mucosa sa kanyang nose and throat, which will now lead the baby to have infection. Now, there are also cases wherein the baby may be given birth na meron po siyang meconium staining. And the meconium is known as the first stool of the baby. Hindi po maganda that the meconium is swallowed or aspirated by the baby because meconium can lead to the inflammation of the lungs. Lagi niyo pong tatandaan that when a baby defecates or nagpass ng meconium inside the womb of the mother, this meconium and the amniotic fluid can mix. Okay? So yung bata po nagsiswimming po siya in amniotic fluid that is stained with meconium. And the baby can swallow that meconium. So what will happen? The baby will put meconium inside his lungs, and that will lead to swelling, leading to secondary pneumonia. So paglabas ng bata, mag-pneumonia po yun because of the swelling that is secondary to meconium aspiration. So what we do is that if the baby has no clear amniotic fluid, meron po siyang meconium staining. It is a little greenish yung meconium, yung amniotic fluid ng bata. We have to do deep tracheal suctioning. Now, these are special cases wherein the baby can be in a compromised position. Ang tawag natin po doon ay meconium-stained babies. If the baby is born with meconium staining or meron siyang amniotic fluid that is stained by the meconium, this is a sign that the baby has already passed the first stool even before birth. And there is a higher risk for that meconium to enter the baby's lungs. Now, meconium is very irritating to the lung tissues. So if the baby shows a sign of struggling to breathe, nahihirapan po siyang huminga because meron po siyang meconium staining, we, healthcare providers, midwives, and nurses should provide deep tracheal suctioning by intubating the baby to remove the secretions or the meconium that have been lodged on the lungs of the baby to prevent what we call the meconium aspiration syndrome. So ang gagawin, tutubuhan po yung bata, magdi-deep tracheal suctioning po tayo so that the suction catheter can also reach the bronchioles of the baby to clear any meconium present in the lungs of the child. Now, meron din po tayong tinatawag na reflex gasping that you need to remember when you are suctioning the baby. Now, when we speak of reflex gasp, suctioning the baby's nose can sometimes trigger a reflex gasp, which is a natural reaction where the baby takes a sudden deep breath. Di ba nga po, kapag kayo ay meron kayong nafe-feel na parang foreign body doon sa ilong nyo ay gumaganon po kayo. So that also happens when you are suctioning the baby. If a suction catheter is placed on the nose of the baby, matitrigger po yung tinatawag natin na reflex gasps. So the baby will do deep gasps of air, and anong mangyayari po? Na-trigger kasi yung kanyang reflex gasping. Now, this gasp can accidentally pull any remaining fluids or secretions deeper into the airway, increasing the risk of blockage or infection. And this is why we have to suction the mouth first before the nose and to do gentle suctioning dapat po. Okay? So bakit? Kasi pag may secretion sa nose and bibig at inuna mo, you started suctioning the nose first, the baby will have a triggered reflex gasp. Gaganon po siya, all the secretions in the mouth will become aspirated or swallowed by the baby, leading to aggravated blocking of the airway. Ang dapat ginagawa po natin is we suction the mouth first before the nose. Bakit? Because if both mouth and nose have secretions and you suction the mouth first, wala na pong secretions on the mouth. The mouth is already clear. Now, you are now suctioning the nose of the patient. When you suction the nose of the patient, ang ginawa niya, the patient had the reflex gasp. Did the baby or the newborn swallow any secretions? No, because the secretions were already removed prior to triggering the reflex gasp because you prioritized suctioning the mouth first before the nose. Kaya kahit matrigger mo yung reflex gasp, pag nag-deep tracheal suctioning ka, wala na pong mai-inhale or maa-aspirate na secretions coming from the mouth of the baby because you have already suctioned it clear. Okay? So these are examples of what I was telling you a while ago na mga suction catheter. So we connect this to what we call the suction machine. At ito po yung mechanically na magsa-suction po ng secretions if we insert this catheter to the mouth and the nose of the baby. So yan po yung gagamitin natin, and this is how the suction catheter is inserted on the mouth and nose of the baby. So yan po yung dapat nyong alalahanin when you are doing suctioning to a baby with mucus obstruction or meconium staining. I would just like to give you a few words of warning when you are in the delivery room. And if the CI or the doctor asks you to do suctioning and you are not yet familiar with how to do suctioning, wag nyo na pong gawin. Okay? Because you can do more harm than good if suctioning is not done properly. You have to remember that it can lead to several harmful effects on the newborn if suctioning is inexpertly performed or done. One of the effects of suctioning that can harm the baby is that it can cause bradycardia. This means that there is slow heartbeat of the baby. So instead na mag more than 100 beats per minute po yung pitik ng puso ng bata, you did suctioning incorrectly. What happens? The blood, the heart rate of the baby dropped because of what you did. Okay? So this means that bradycardia can be triggered by inexpertly performed suctioning, and suctioning too deeply. Masyado pong ma-deep yung paglagay mo ng suction catheter or too aggressively can stimulate the baby's throat, causing a decrease in the heart rate of the neonate, which can be dangerous if not managed properly. Aside from that, suctioning improperly can also lead to apnea. And this apnea is what we call the absence of breathing. Now, you have to remember that over-suctioning, masyado mong nasobrahan sa kakasuction yung bata. Over-suctioning or rough handling during the procedure can interrupt the baby's natural breathing pattern, leading to a pause or stop in their breathing. Dahil nga sa suction ka ng suction, yung bata titigil na din po siya sa paghinga. Okay? So you can interrupt the baby's natural breathing pattern if you are suctioning wrongly, leading to a pause or the stop in their breathing, which can be critical if not immediately addressed by doctors or nurses who are better at suctioning than you. Now, aside from that, pag mali yung suctioning mo, you can also trigger what we call the vagal-induced bradycardia. Okay? So the vagus nerve helps control the heart rate and the breathing of the baby. Now, if this nerve is overstimulated because of that suction catheter na ini-insert mo, because of that improper suctioning, you stimulated what we call the vagus nerve, it can cause a sharp drop in the baby's heart rate. So pwedeng bumaba po yung kanyang heart rate altogether because of the what we call vagal-induced bradycardia. Now, this is a phenomenon or a reflex that can be triggered by deep or rough suctioning of the mouth and nose. So dapat po, pag magsasuction po tayo, we have to be very gentle to prevent bradycardia, to prevent apnea, and also vagal-induced bradycardia. Aside from that, if you don't know how to suction and yet you still performed suctioning on your newborn baby, maaari pong mawala yung kanyang oxygen saturation. There will be slower rise in the baby's oxygen saturation. Imbes na tumaas po yung kanyang concentration of oxygen on the blood of the baby, you will lower the oxygen levels because of too much suctioning. Now, when suctioning is performed too vigorously, it can remove not just the mucus, not just the secretions, but you can also remove the oxygen that are already present in the airway. Lagi niyong tatandaan, yung oxygen po, they can also be found on the airway because the baby will also try to breathe. And there is oxygen on the airway, but you do too much suctioning. And when you do too much suctioning, vigorously suctioning the baby, you can also draw out the oxygen out of the baby's body. And this will result in a slower increase in their oxygen levels in the baby's blood. So that will delay oxygenation in the different parts of the body of the baby. So essentially, the baby's oxygen concentration may take longer to reach a safe and a stable level because the necessary oxygen is being sucked out along with the secretions. So dapat po hindi natin ginagawa ang suctioning kapag hindi po tayo marunong. And aside from that, you can also cause mucosal trauma. Pwede pong masugat yung kanyang throat and nose if you don't know how to do suctioning properly and yet you still perform it. Now, improper or forceful suctioning can cause the damage to the delicate mucosal lining of the baby's nose, mouth, or even throat. These can lead to small cuts, mga maliliit na sugat, or even abrasions on these sensitive tissues, making it easier for bacteria and other pathogens and microorganisms to enter and cause infection on the baby. And repeated trauma, dami niyang sugat-sugat, no? Because of suctioning na inexpertly done. Repeated trauma can also cause swelling and discomfort in the baby, which may further complicate the baby's inability to breathe effectively. So, the general rule natin is that if you are not yet an expert in suctioning, do not attempt to perform suctioning so that you will not harm the baby rather than doing them good. Another important component of essential intrapartal newborn care is what we call care of the cord. So we discussed already how to properly regulate the temperature of the baby and do or create a neutral environment for the newborn. Aside from that, when we have already established a neutral environment for the baby na nape-prevent na natin ng hypothermia, the next thing that we're going to do is establish respiration in the child by assisting the child to properly remove secretions, to how to breathe properly. Pag nakahinga na po yung bata, if the baby is already crying, now is the time to care for the cord. Now, you have to remember that the umbilical cord should be clamped only after it stops pulsating. Hindi po agad-agad na kinaklamp natin yung cord and then kinakat after na lumabas yung bata. We do not do that anymore. So I repeat the umbilical cord should only be clamped only after it stops pulsating. So after the delivery of the baby, one of the midwives will hold the umbilical cord of the baby and feel for the pulsation. As long as there is still pulsation coming from the cord, that means that the placenta is still absorbing oxygenated blood from the mother and is still delivering oxygenated blood to the baby. Now, maganda po ito because the baby will not automatically breathe after he goes out of the womb of the mother. Hindi naman po siya agad-agad humihinga That is the reason why the lungs are still filled with oxygen and the baby may have trouble initiating breathing. And once the baby is still having trouble initiating breathing, at least the placenta is still doing its job of providing oxygenated blood to the baby. So at least hindi po makukulangan ng oxygen yung baby or hindi po siya magkakaroon ng hypoxia. So I repeat, we have to delay clamping and cutting of the cord, and we only cut the cord if it already stops pulsating. Now, this delay in clamping allows more oxygenated blood to transfer from the placenta to the baby, giving the newborn a stronger start in terms of blood volume and oxygen levels. Now, sir, bakit po kailangan namin ang mag-delay ng clamping? Because we want more oxygen and nutrients to go to the baby. Paano? Waiting ensures that the baby receives extra oxygen and nutrients, which can be specifically helpful in stabilizing their breathing and overall health right after birth. Kung kasi agad-agad kang pagkalabas ng bata, clamp, cut ka na po agad, these oxygen and nutrients may not be transferred from the mother to the baby. So we want to wait before cutting the cord. We have to wait for the cord to stop pulsating first. However, not all babies will benefit from delayed cord clamping. This means that delayed cord clamping can only be applied to neonates who are well, or they are okay, or they don't have any specific problems being born. But for babies who are jaundiced, or those who are requiring immediate attention, kunwari paglabas ay merong immediate na problem na nakikita yung mga doktor and they need to perform resuscitation to the baby, sometimes delayed cord clamping is not done for them. So for babies who are at risk of jaundice or who are already showing signs of jaundice, or those with emergency medical conditions, the umbilical cord should be cut immediately after birth. Now, that is because we want to prevent excessive blood transfer. Ibig sabihin yon, in your jaundice po kasi, it is the death of the RBC. Namamatay po yung RBC sa katawan, kaya yung excess na product po yon, yung ating waste product po of RBC death, becomes your indirect bilirubin, which will now cause jaundice. Now, kung marami po kasing dugo na pupunta pa kay baby, okay, so there is more blood being pumped from the placenta to the baby, may jaundice na yung baby mo, that will aggravate the situation and that will increase the risk of the baby developing jaundice. So we have to delay cord clamping because we do not want to allow more blood to flow from the placenta to the baby. Now, more blood cells in the baby will mean that there is a higher bilirubin level, which can worsen the jaundice. Aside from that, by clamping the cord early, you limit the extra transfer of blood and you prevent the rapid rise in the bilirubin levels in the baby, and therefore reducing the chance of severe jaundice complications like what we call kernicterus. Pangit kasi po ang kernicterus because the indirect bilirubin, which is a waste product of the RBC death, can enter the brain, causing permanent brain damage. Okay, so by clamping the cord po, napipigilan po natin yung occurrence of what we call the kernicterus. Now, let us go to the proper cord clamping and cutting. So I said a while ago that you have to wait for the cord to stop pulsating before clamping and cutting the cord. And that will take approximately 2 to 3 minutes for the cord to stop pulsating. So imagine na wala na po yung pulsating sa cord. There is no more pulsation in the cord. The next thing that we're going to do is we will now clamp and cut the cord. So how will we do that? We place the cord clamp 1 to 1.5 inches above the baby's abdomen. So that's the cord clamp, yung plastic po na pang-clamp natin. So that's the color blue in this one, in the picture with the baby lying down. That's the cord clamp. We will apply it 1 to 1.5 inches above the abdomen. And then, the distance, bakit po kailangan na may distance po from the abdomen to the 1 to 1.5 inches above the abdomen at dun kayo maglalagay ng cord clamp? This distance will help ensure that there is enough cord that is left for proper care while minimizing the risk of cutting into the vital structures. Kasi kung ito yung abdomen ng bata, doon mo mismo sa abdomen nilagay yung cord clamp, pag magka-cut ka, there is a risk of cutting the vital structures of the baby. So dapat po you give an allowance of 1 to 1.5 inches above the abdomen before applying or putting the cord clamp. So after putting the cord clamp, which is the color blue in this picture, the next thing that you're going to do is you have to apply the Kelly-Forceps, or you have to position the Kelly-Forceps 5 inches above the abdomen on the maternal side. So from the cord clamp po, no? This is the abdomen. This is the cord. 1 to 1.5 inches, maglalagay ka ng cord clamp. And then from the base or from the abdomen, 5 inches above, you will apply the Kelly-Forceps as seen on this picture na color red po dito. That's what we call the Kelly-Forceps. Okay? So you have to apply the Kelly-Forceps 5 inches above the abdomen on the maternal side. And this will help control the blood flow and prevent excessive bleeding during the cutting process. Para po pag nag-cut po kayo, there will be no bleeding that will occur in the maternal side of the cord. Okay, so after po that you have already applied the cord clamp and then the Kelly-Forceps, you have to cut 1 centimeter above the cord clamp. Okay, so the next nursing responsibility or midwifery responsibility that you should do after cutting the cord is do not release the Kelly clamp on the maternal side. Okay, so sa maternal side mo, yung Kelly clamp po doon, dapat po naka-intact, that it is still clamped on the cord on the maternal side, because releasing it can cause blood to leak out, potentially leading to complications such as maternal hemorrhage. Because the placenta is still attached to the mother, and then pag nirelease mo yung clamp po doon sa cord clamp on the maternal side, pwede pong lumabas yung maraming dugo from the maternal side, leading to maternal hemorrhage. Next, after cutting the cord, the next nursing and midwifery responsibility is to check for the completeness of blood vessels. So after cutting the cord nga po, you have to check to ensure that all blood vessels are intact. Normally, there should be 3 blood vessels that you can see in the funis or in the umbilical cord. You have 2 arteries and 1 vein. So ito po yung tinatawag natin na AVA or artery, vein, artery. As you can see in the picture, there are 3 holes on the umbilical cord. The big one is the vein carrying oxygenated blood, and the 2 small ones are arteries carrying unoxygenated blood. You have to remember that these 3 should be present. 3 po dapat yung nakikita nyo na blood vessels on our patients, umbilical cord. If any of the blood vessels are missing, or if there are any abnormalities, kunwari nakakita ka ng 4 na blood vessels or dadalawa lang, like for example for this case, you have to report immediately to the doctor, as this could indicate potential complications or congenital anomalies in the baby. So you have to immediately inform the doctor after cutting the cord, and you have checked the completeness of the cord, and you noted that there is an aberration. Meron pong sobra or kulang na umbilical cord imbes na, or umbilical blood vessel, imbes lang po na AVA, ay mas marami ka pang nakita or mas konti kang nakitang blood vessel, you have to report immediately to the doctor. Now let us talk about the EINC guidelines when caring for the umbilical cord. Now according to EINC, when caring for the umbilical cord, it is important not to milk the cord towards the baby before clamping and cutting. Yung mga ibang ginagawa kasi nila before, yung mga old practices before, was that the cord kasi is filled with blood. Meron pa pong makikita doon na dugo. Okay? So the midwife or the nurse before cutting, they will try to milk the cord towards the baby, saying, ay, sayang yung dugo. They want more blood to go to the baby, so they milk the cord towards the baby. Now, that is not already an accepted practice. It is already an antiquated practice to milk the cord towards the baby before clamping and cutting it. Now, bakit po hindi na siya pwede? Milking the cord in the direction of the baby can cause small blood vessels in the brain of the baby to rupture, leading to serious complication. Bakit? Because of the sudden rush of blood from the cord going to the baby because you're milking it. The small blood vessels on the brain of the baby can lead to rupture because of the milking and leading to serious complications in the baby. So, no milking of the cord na po ang kailangan in cutting the cord. So, what do? If you want more blood to enter the baby, wait for the cord to stop pulsating before clamping the cord. No need to milk the blood from the cord coming from towards the baby. Okay? So, next, after clamping and cutting the cord, you have to observe for the oozing of blood. So pag nag-cut ka ng cord and you noticed that there is blood oozing from the cord stump, you have to place a second tie or a second cord clamp in between the skin and the clamp. So gaya ng dito sa picture, if you already cut the cord and there is already bleeding na nakita mo, and meron na nga siyang clamp dito, there's still bleeding, you can apply another cord clamp at the bottom of the first cord clamp that you have placed. So, pwede ka pong maglagay dito to secure the blood vessel to prevent any bleeding. Okay? So, the additional cord tie or the cord clamp will secure the cord and prevent further bleeding, ensuring the safety and well-being of the newborn. Ayaw po nating mag-bleeding yung bata because we don't want the baby to suffer from anemia or hemorrhagic shock. So, you have to notice or observe the cord after cutting para po makita nyo pag may oozing po doon ng blood, you have to apply a second cord clamp or cord tie below the first cord clamp that you have attached. That is how you stop the bleeding in the cord. Contrary to the past practices wherein we put betadine or alcohol in the cord, hindi na po pwede yon. What we do right now is what we call dry cord care. This is recommended by the EINC, and it is a method for caring for the umbilical cord stump. Now, it is essential to avoid applying any substances in the cord, such as alcohol, ointments, powders, because this can irritate the area and increase the risk for infection. So, hindi na din po pwede ang binders or big keys, or in Ilocano, it is known as the barriques, to be placed on the cord stump because these can trap moisture and create a warm environment for sweating and for bacteria to grow, which can lead to infection. So we do not do that anymore. We have to keep the cord dry and exposed to air to promote proper healing and minimize complications. So that is what we do in our care of the cord. Dry cord care po, and we prevent it from getting wet and dirty. Since we're already on the topic of cutting the cord and caring for the cord, let us now talk about the post-cord care guidelines or paano natin aalagaan at lilinisin ang cord po according to your essential intrapartal newborn care. Now, number one thing that we need to do is that we have to keep the cord dry as much as possible. So after cutting and clamping the cord, it is crucial to keep the umbilical cord dry to prevent infection. You have to avoid covering it with tight clothing or bandages or gumagamit sila doon ng mga abdominal binders. We do not do that anymore. We have to simply leave it exposed to air whenever possible. That is what we call air drying. Bakit po hindi na pwede ang maglagay ng mga abdominal binders, mga coverings po? Because that will only lead to moisture accumulation. The baby may have sweating when there is a covering on their abdomen. So what will happen? That sweat will go to the cord of the baby and moisture will become a good breeding ground for the microorganisms that can lead to infection. So simply put, we just air dry the cord and do not put anything there. We have to keep it dry. And when I say keep it dry, do not place any alcohol, betadine, or iodine solution. Wala na po tayong ilalagay doon. Not like before that we used to drench alcohol on the umbilical cord of the baby. This time po, we do not give or put alcohol on the cord stump any longer. Okay? So next, you have to remember as well that the cord will naturally fall off around 7 to the 10th day of life if you kept it dry. Kung air dry po, 7 to 10 days po, malalaglag or mawawala na po yung cord. It will fall off after 7 to 10 days. And a research that I have read is that when they put alcohol on the cord every day, it will delay the falling off of the cord. Meaning, the cord will stay intact or attached to the abdomen of the baby until 12 to 15 days. And we don't want that to happen because the more that the cord is attached to the abdomen of the baby, the more that the patient will be exposed to infection. So we have to make sure that we facilitate the falling off of the cord by keeping it air dried. Okay? So during this time, you have to ensure that the cord is clean and dry as much as possible. So what do you do? During the first 7 to 10 days of life, when the cord is still intact, you do not give full bath to the baby. Ibig sabihin, hindi po pwedeng paliguan yung bata so that we can prevent the cord from getting wet. That is one of the reasons that we can do to facilitate the drying of the cord of the baby. Aside from that, when the cord falls off, after the umbilical stump falls off, there might be a small pink or moist spot where the cord was connected. So ito po yung nakikita nyo sa tabi ng picture ko. This is what I am referring to. This is called the granulating area. The granulating area is a normal part of the healing process. It is just where the cord was connected before it fell off. So yung granulating area po na ito, although it appears reddish in color, there is no significant or clinical significance of this granulating area. Mawawala din po yan. It disappears after 24 to 48 hours after the cord falls off, but we can use silver nitrate to cauterize it para po mag-close po siya. Okay? So aside from that, you have to note that there are possible infection that can occur on the cord of the baby if you do not keep it dry and it is made to be dirty. Pag madumi or ito ay basa, it can lead to infection. So how do we prevent infection? Air dry. You have to air dry the cord. Do not apply any alcohol, do not apply any powder or ointments on the cord unless it is, of course, advised by the healthcare professional. Aside from that, you have to monitor during the 7th to the 10th day of life of the baby, when the cord is still intact, you have to monitor for the signs of infection. And what are the signs of infection? Redness, swelling, there is foul odor coming from the cord, there is pus or discharges, and the baby has fever. Those are the signs of infection. You have to report these immediately if you can see that on our patient. So ito po, this is the middle picture. That is an example of an infected cord. Meron po siyang redness, meron din po siyang discharges, and there is also a foul smell coming from that cord. That means that the cord is infected. Okay? So, bakit po natin kailangan na i-air dry yung cord na yon at hindi dapat ginagalaw-galaw? As much as possible, we minimize handling it, we prevent covering it, and we just expose it to air. Why do we want to do that? Proper cord care ensures that the baby's navel or funis heals, and we prevent complications and we promote healthy development when we air dry the cord of the baby. You have to keep an eye on the umbilical cord. You have to inspect it for signs of infections. So pag nakakita ka ng increased redness around the cord or the surrounding skin, you can see a redness on the tissues, that can be an indication of infection. If there is a puffiness or edema or swelling in the cord, you have to also report it to the doctor because that can be a sign of infection as well. Along with foul smell or fishy smell that is coming from the cord and the presence of discharges or pus that is oozing from the cord. Those are signs of infection. If the area also feels warm to touch, so you touch the abdomen of the child, medyo mainit po or warm po siya, this could already suggest inflammation. And if the baby has fever, then that is a sure sign na po that the baby has infection of the cord. Okay, so these are things that are reportable to the doctor so that the doctor can prescribe antibiotics to our patient so that the condition will not lead to septicemia or hindi po magkaroon ng infection on the bloodstream, the whole body of the patient. Okay, so that is what we do for your cord care. Another important component of essential intrapartal newborn care is what we call CRIDS prophylaxis, or the care of the eyes, or the eye prophylaxis of the neonate. Okay? So the eye prophylaxis or CRIDS prophylaxis was introduced in the year 1884 to prevent gonorrheal conjunctivitis in newborns. Bakit po kailangan natin ng eye prophylaxis? Because when a baby passes through the birth canal, there is a risk of contamination from the mother's cervical secretions, which may contain bacteria like Neisseria gonorrhea. This Neisseria gonorrhea can cause gonorrhea or a sexually transmitted disease. Okay? So when the baby passes the birth canal, the baby will come in contact with the cervical secretions coming from the vagina of the mother, and these microorganisms can enter the eyes of the baby. So if this bacteria comes in contact with the baby's eyes, they can cause serious infection that may lead to neonatal blindness. Ibig sabihin, the baby can become blind or pwede po siyang mabulag because of the sexually transmitted disease discharges coming from the mother. So that's the reason why, to protect the baby's eyes from blindness because of this gonorrheal conjunctivitis and chlamydial conjunctivitis, which are sexually transmitted diseases, we have to put a sterile solution of erythromycin ointment or silver nitrate concentrate that we put immediately after birth to prevent this infection from occurring. Now, this treatment that I said a while ago are effective to reduce the risk of developing eye infection, and we ensure the better outcome of newborns and that they do not become blind because of the STD of the mother. Sir, lahat-lahat po ba ng mga bata, even if their mothers do not have sexually transmitted disease, will all of them receive CRIDS prophylaxis? The answer is yes. Because regardless if the mother is diagnosed with gonorrhea or chlamydia or not, routinely, all babies who are delivered via normal spontaneous delivery should be given CRIDS prophylaxis or eye prophylaxis. It is important to perform this prophylaxis promptly and accordingly to established protocols to safeguard the baby's vision right from the start of their lives. So lahat-lahat po, regardless if the mother has STD or not, all of the babies will be given CRIDS prophylaxis to ensure that they do not become blind because of the STD of the parents. So as mentioned a while ago, the causative agents of newborn conjunctivitis include the following. The first one is what we call Neisseria gonorrhea. Okay? So this is the primary causative agent for gonorrheal conjunctivitis. Now, ano ba kasi ang Neisseria gonorrhea? The Neisseria gonorrhea is a bacteria that can cause gonorrheal conjunctivitis, which can lead to severe eye infection and potential blindness if not treated properly. It is transmitted from the mother during delivery when the baby passes through the birth canal. So again, Neisseria gonorrhea causes gonorrhea, and during this time, there is a whitish and thin vaginal discharge coming from the mother, and when the baby is born via normal spontaneous delivery, this discharge can go to the baby, leading to gonorrheal conjunctivitis, leading to blindness. Now, the other cause of your neonatal blindness is what we call Chlamydia trachomatis. The Chlamydia trachomatis is the causative agent for the STD, which we call chlamydia. Now, this bacterium can cause chlamydial conjunctivitis, which is another serious eye condition in the newborns. Like the Neisseria gonorrhea, chlamydia trachomatis can also be transmitted from the mother to the baby during childbirth. Pero paano po natin mapagdi-differentiate yung Neisseria gonorrhea from the chlamydia trachomatis? As mentioned a while ago, for gonorrhea, there is a whitish, thin vaginal discharge. But in chlamydia, there is the presence of cottage cheese-like formation on the vagina of the mother. And this will also contain the chlamydia trachomatis, yung mga cheese-like na substances found in the vagina of the mother. These contain the causative agent. And when the baby is born via normal spontaneous delivery, these microorganisms can enter the eyes of the baby, leading to chlamydial conjunctivitis. You have to put to mind that both of these infections highlight the importance of CRIDS prophylaxis. Importante po na lahat ng mga bata ay mabigyan ng CRIDS prophylaxis to prevent them from having serious complications that are related to eye infection or what we call blindness. Pwede po silang mabulag if it is left untreated. Therefore, all babies should be given CRIDS prophylaxis. So, as nurses and midwives, what are we going to do? To prevent neonatal blindness that is caused by infections such as gonorrhea and chlamydial conjunctivitis, there are several methods that we can use or do to prevent this infection from ever occurring and to prevent neonatal blindness. The first one is an older method already. It is the instillation of silver nitrate concentrate on the eyes of the baby. Like I said, this is already an old method which was used for eye prophylaxis. While it is effective in preventing infections, it has already been replaced by more modern treatments which include the use of the oxytetracycline ophthalmic ointment. So ito po yung ginagamit natin. Oxytetracycline ophthalmic ointment is now the drug of choice that is a preferred treatment to gonorrheal and chlamydial conjunctivitis. Ano nga ba ang oxytetracycline ophthalmic ointment? This ointment not only helps prevent gonorrheal conjunctivitis, but it is also effective in eliminating chlamydia trachomatis, thereby reducing the risk of associated eye infections. So when you apply this medication to the eye of the patient, you have to remember to gently open the newborn's eyes by applying slight pressure on the upper and lower eyelids of the baby. And then the ointment should be applied from the inner canthus to the outer canthus of the eye. Specifically, we place it on the lower conjunctiva. So after application of the medication, we allow the baby's eyes to close to facilitate the spreading of the ointment. Sir, bakit po inner to outer canthus? Para po we do not spread the infection. Bakit? Because if we put the medication from outer to inner, there's a possibility that your hand may slip and you might put the tip of that medication to the other eye, which may contaminate the other one if this is already infected. So dapat po inner to outer canthus ang manner of application natin ng medication. Now, sir, importante po ba ang oxytetracycline? Yes, it is very important. This method of application of the medication is crucial in safeguarding the newborn's vision and ensuring that they remain free from serious eye infections. Another important component of essential intrapartum newborn care is the prevention of bleeding in newborn babies. Now, you have to remember that vitamin K is crucial for blood coagulation or what we call blood clotting, and it plays a vital role in preventing excessive bleeding in neonates. Now, vitamin K deficiency bleeding can occur in our neonates if they do not have enough vitamin K. Now, ano ba kasi ang vitamin K deficiency bleeding? It is a common condition that can occur in newborns due to the insufficient levels of vitamin K. So dahil po sa mababa yung vitamin K, which is a clotting factor, pwede pong mag-bleeding yung bagong panganak na sanggol. And newborns are at risk of vitamin K deficiency bleeding because they are born with low levels of vitamin K. Sir, bakit po mababa ang kanilang vitamin K? Because of the simple reason that vitamin K is typically synthesized by the intestinal flora, which means that the vitamin K comes from the microorganisms that are present on the intestines of the baby. Now, these beneficial bacteria are not present in the gut. Ibig sabihin, the child is delivered with a sterile intestines, which is deficient of intestinal flora. Meaning, if the intestines do not have this intestinal microflora, therefore, there will be nothing to synthesize or produce vitamin K, leading to vitamin K deficiency in infants. So, I repeat the deficiency in infants of vitamin K is because of their low levels of vitamin K. And that is because of the sterile intestines that lack the necessary intestinal flora to produce vitamin K. So what do? Gusto natin na magkaroon ng vitamin K yung bata. We want to establish a healthy culture of microorganisms in the intestines of the child so that if there are microflora or microorganisms in the intestines of the child, maproproduce po or masisynthesize po ang vitamin K. So what are we going to do? Ang gagawin po natin is that we have to establish breastfeeding early on after delivery. So anong ibig sabihin nito? As the baby begins to breastfeed, we introduce nutrients in the baby, and aside from that, because the baby will be in contact with the nipples of the mother, and the nipples also contain microorganisms, we are already introducing microorganisms on the intestines of the child, leading to the production of vitamin K, or the production or deposition of intestinal flora, which will synthesize vitamin K. So that means that breastfeeding can prevent vitamin K deficiency bleeding because we allow the child to swallow microorganisms that can lead to the inoculation of the intestines of the intestinal microflora, which will now produce or synthesize vitamin K. Now, aside from that, to further prevent bleeding in the neonates, a vitamin K injection is often given to newborns shortly after birth to prevent vitamin K deficiency bleeding, as you can see on the photo on my left. Now, this injection can help ensure that there is adequate vitamin K levels on the newborn and reducing the risk of bleeding disorders such as hemorrhagic diseases of the newborn, as you can see on the pictures given. So, ayaw po nating mangyari yan. Ayaw po nating magkaroon ng bleeding yung ating mga pasyente. And that is the reason why we have to give them vitamin K injections. So, what do we do as nurses and midwives? Vitamin K administration in neonates and newborns is needed to prevent bleeding. Okay, so anong ibibigay natin? We give an intramuscular or IM injection of vitamin K or phytomenadione, and it is administered immediately after birth. Now, administering this vitamin K shortly after birth is already a standard practice in neonatal care, and it is included in essential intrapartal newborn care guidelines because it plays a crucial role in preventing potential bleeding complications in newborns, or what we call the vitamin K deficiency bleeding. Okay? So, ilan po yung ibibigay natin na dosage? What is the dosage of the vitamin K that we administer at birth? So, for full-term neonates, we give a dosage of 0.1 ml of vitamin K or phytomenadione on the vastus lateralis, intramuscular. For preterms naman po, we give them a dosage of half or 0.05 ml to accommodate their lower body weight and sensitivity. So again, as I mentioned a while ago, the route of the injection, it is administered intramuscularly or injected at the vastus lateralis muscle, which is located at the outer thigh of the baby. This side is the most preferred site for injection because it is easily accessible and it is also safe for the newborns. So, sir, bakit po tayo nagbibigay ng vitamin K injection in these neonates? The action of the vitamin K phytomenadione injection is to support blood coagulation and prevent and promote clotting and prevent vitamin K deficiency bleeding. By providing this essential nutrient, which is vitamin K, the risk for VKDB or vitamin K deficiency bleeding is reduced, and we help the baby to ensure that there will be safe and healthy well-being of the neonates if we give them the vitamin K injection. So dapat po binibigyan natin lahat ng mga bagong panganak na sanggol ng vitamin K injection. I repeat, for term babies, 0.1 ml, and for preterm babies, half of that dosage or 0.05 ml. Yaman din lamang na napag-uusapan na natin ang mga needles and injections, pag-usapan naman po natin ang prevention of infection in neonates, which is also subsumed as one of the components of essential intrapartal newborn care. Now, prevention of infection in newborns is also one of our primary responsibilities as future midwives and nurses. Immunization, or what we call vaccination or inoculation, are a critical component of infection prevention in infants and young children. Under the Presidential Decree number 996, or what we call Expanded Program on Immunization, there is a compulsory immunization of children under 8 years old and below. So this means that we are directed by law to give vaccination and immunization to children under 8 years old against the vaccine-preventable diseases. So the first vaccine that we will be giving to our patient is what we call the BCG vaccine. It is an essential step in protecting the newborns and young children from serious infectious diseases, contributing to their long-term health and well-being. Importante po na bigyan natin ng bakuna laban sa sakit ang mga bata so that they can grow to become healthy and strong. So like I said, the first vaccine that we give is the BCG vaccine. So for the dosage and administration, the BCG vaccine is administered at a dosage of 0.5 ml. Either we give it intradermally in the upper arm, just below the deltoid muscle, dito po, or we can give it at the back, at the buttocks, or the upper outer buttocks, or sa puwet po ng bata. So contrary to the vitamin K and Hepa B injection na intramuscular po, the BCG vaccine is given intradermally, meaning the medication or the vaccine is just placed under the skin of the baby. So that is the route of the BCG vaccine. So why do we need to give BCG to the baby? What is its preventive benefits? So the BCG vaccine helps protect against what we call pulmonary tuberculosis or PTB, which is a common and serious form of tuberculosis that affects the lungs of the baby. Aside from that, it also prevents TB meningitis or tuberculous meningitis, which is a severe infection of the membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord caused by the causative agent for tuberculosis. Now, pine-prevent din ng BCG ang leprosy, which is a chronic infectious disease that is caused by Mycobacterium leprae. So that's the reason why we want to give BCG vaccine to the baby, because we want to prevent primary complex or yung neonatal na tuberculosis sa ating mga patients. Okay? So what do you have to remember when you are giving BCG vaccine to the baby? It is important that we give health teachings to our patients and explain the normal reactions of receiving BCG. Now, after receiving BCG vaccine, some of the normal reactions should include fever. Okay? Ang fever kasi, nangyayari yan if the immune system is being activated by a foreign body. So a fever can occur after the inoculation or vaccination. So it is a mild fever that can occur as the immune system responds to the vaccine. Sabihin natin sa mga magulang, ma'am, it is but normal for your child to develop fever when they are being vaccinated. It just goes to show that their immune system is being triggered to create antibodies against the disease. Aside from that, you also have to explain to the parents that keloid formation or scarring is normal in BCG vaccination because the vaccine is placed under the skin. And in some cases, there is a raised scar or what we call keloid that may develop at the injection site. So sabihin nyo, ma'am, it is normal for the baby to have a keloid after they have been injected with the BCG vaccine. Now, there is a special consideration that you have to remember when you are giving BCG. If the mother has PTB, may TB po yung nanay or may tuberculosis po yung nanay, and the mother is already undergoing treatment for TB for 2 months already, we can defer giving BCG. The BCG vaccine should be deferred or wag na pong ibigay because in such cases, the infant can receive the passive immunity through the breast milk of the mother, as the mother's antibodies can already help protect the baby until vaccination can safely occur. Ibig sabihin, kahit hindi na po tayo magbigay ng bakuna, the antibodies coming from the mother can be passed through the breast milk in breastfeeding. So we can defer na po yung giving of BCG if the mother has already PTB and she is taking treatment for 2 months already. So BCG is the first vaccine that we give at birth, and the second vaccine that we give at birth is what we call the hepatitis B vaccine. Okay, so yung hepatitis B vaccine nyo is a vital step in safeguarding the newborns from infection, and we ensure their health and safety and reducing their risk of developing chronic hepatitis B infection later in life. Because the baby has come in contact with the blood of the mother and the baby will be exposed to this virus that the baby can develop Hepa B. Paglaki niya po, no, kailangan ibigay na po natin ang Hepa B vaccine at birth. So the Hepa B vaccine dosage and administration, the first dose of Hepa B is given at birth. The Hepa B vaccine is given at birth. And a few years ago, yung Hepa B vaccine po, it was given at the 9th month of life. But now, according to a recent legislation or law, according to Senate Bill 2012 or the Republic Act RA 7846, yung practice po of giving the Hepa B vaccine at 9 months, hindi na po pwede. Hepa B vaccine is already given at birth. Okay? So how do we give the Hepa B vaccine? The Hepa B vaccine is administered as an intramuscular injection. So sa muscles po siya binibigay, and it is given at 0.5 ml dosage in the outer part of the thigh or what we call the vastus lateralis. So according to the World Health Organization, they recommend that the best time to administer Hepa B vaccine is within the first 12 hours after delivery. Bakit daw? Because this early vaccination is crucial in preventing the transmission of the virus from the mother to the child, especially if the mother is infected. So pinakamaganda po na maibigay na ang bakuna 12 hours after delivery. Within that 12-hour period, maibigay na po natin yung bakuna sa bata para in case that the mother is infected with Hepa B, at least the baby can still combat that Hepa B surface antigen at hindi siya magka-develop ng Hepa B virus. Okay? Now, another responsibility of the nurses and midwives caring for the newborn, according to the EINC, is what we call newborn identification. Proper identification of newborns is a crucial step immediately after delivery to ensure their safety and prevent mix-up. Siyempre, ayaw nating magkapalit-palit yung mga pasyente natin at yung mga anak nila, di ba? So we have to put proper label to the child kasi di ba mas masaya pag may label, charing. According to the World Health Organization po kasi, identification protocols should be followed meticulously to maintain the newborn's safety and security. So anong gagawin natin? We have to give identification bands. They must be placed on the baby before they leave the delivery room. So before lumabas po yung bata sa delivery room, we have already to place identification bands to our patients or newborn babies. Studies show that misidentification is one of the leading causes of safety incidents in neonatal units. So ang mangyayari po kapag hindi kayo nagbigay ng identification bands is that pwede pong magkapalit yung mga anak at yung mga nanay nila. So what will happen is magkakaroon po ng mix-up and we don't want that to happen. Kasi kung tsaka ka at maganda yung anak mo, ay jackpot. Pero pag ikaw naman ay maganda, pero tsaka yung binigay sa yung anak, ay lugi ka. So ayaw natin yon. So we have to give identification bands. Okay? So each band that is placed on the baby should contain the mother's hospital number, the mother's full name, the baby's sex, and their date and time of birth, to ensure that all relevant details are accurately documented. Now, ilang bands ang ilalagay natin? We have to put 2 identification bands on our patient. 1 on the wrist and 1 on the ankle. And this will reduce the risk of the bands falling off or being removed intentionally. Para at least, pag matanggal man yung isa, at least meron pa ring present na isang identification band that is placed on the ankle. So dalawa po ha, wrist, and the other one is on the ankle or on the foot. Now, aside from that, we also have to take the newborn's footprints for additional safety measure. In case na matanggal po yung dalawang identification bands ng pasyente, at least we have kept a footprint of the baby so that we can properly match the baby to their mothers. Okay? So taking the newborn's footprints is an essential additional safety measure that serves as a backup identification method in case the identification bands fell off. These prints are stored in the baby's chart for future references. So dapat po nilalagay po natin siya sa chart ng pasyente natin yung mga identification bands. Okay? So while modern methods like barcode scanning and electronic health records are already becoming common, dapat po ay maglagay pa rin tayo ng identification bands sa ating mga pasyente for patient safety. Now, apart from identification of the newborn, ang gagawin din po natin is we are also responsible for the registration of new births. Okay? So this is what we call the Birth Registration Law or the Presidential Decree 651. This means that all births handled by nurses and midwives should be registered in the local civil registry within the first 30 days. At responsibility po natin yun ng mga nurses and midwives. It is mandatory for the midwives and nurses who attended the delivery to register the newborn within 30 days after birth, or else we will be punished by law if we do not facilitate their registration. So, sir, why is it important to register the baby's birth? Birth registration is essential for several reasons. Number 1, it provides legal recognition of the child's existence. Ibig sabihin, buhay yung bata at hindi siya kolorom, so ibig sabihin siya ay rehistrado bilang mamamayan ng Pilipinas. He is a registered citizen of the country and the Philippines recognizes his or her presence in it because of that registration. Aside from that, birth registration is required for eligibility in various important activities such as enrolling in school, voting, applying for passports, and accessing healthcare services. So kailangan po yung ating PSA or yung birth certificate natin bago tayo makapagboto, pumunta sa school, mag-enroll, magpa-passport. So that is needed for these documentary requirements. So information to be recorded before we go to the local civil registry include the following details. Number 1, you should already have the infant's name or the full name that is given or assigned to the baby. Aside from that, you have to have the mother's name, the name of the baby's biological mother, the name of the baby's biological father, the birth date or the exact date and time when the baby was born, the birthplace or the location, be it hospital, home, or where the baby was delivered na munisipyo. So those are the data that we need before we go to the local civil registry to register the birth of the child. So ito po yung sample ng certificate of live birth na kailangan nating i-fill out para po maipasa sa local civil registry at sa ating pong PSA. And that will become the basis for the birth certificate of our newborn babies. The last component of essential intrapartal newborn care that we will be discussing today, that we also need to perform as midwives and nurses, is the anthropometric measurement in newborns. Okay? So anthropometric measurements are essential for assessing the growth and the health of a newborn. There are several standards for measuring, but these are the things that we measure in anthropometric measurement. The first is the length of the baby. So what we use as a landmark is the top of the head or the vertex to the heel of the baby or yung kanyang heel sa may paa while the baby is lying flat and they are on the measuring board. So the normal length of the neonate is 45 to 55 centimeters at birth. Now, yan po yung magiging basis natin to determine if the baby's measurements are normal or not. 45 to 55 centimeter is the normal length of the baby. Now, if the baby's length is less than 45 centimeters, this may indicate intrauterine growth restriction or maaari pong hindi lumaki yung bata, kaya maliit lang yung kanyang length, or it can also be a sign of premature birth or premature delivery. Or it can also suggest congenital anomaly. So you have to report it to the doctor if the baby has less than 45 centimeters na birth length. Aside from that, if the baby has more than 55 centimeters na birth length, that may suggest macrosomia or large for gestational age, which means that the baby may be very big and the baby may be born of a diabetic mother. Or pwede pong merong genetic predisposition yung bata na meron siyang giantism kaya po siya malaki. So a big or a big birth length will also mean problem for the baby as well. So next na i-measure natin is the head circumference, kung gaano kalaki yung ulo ng bata. So we measure the head circumference by putting a tape measure around the widest part of the head, typically on the eyebrows of the baby, paikot sa ears ng bata, around the back of the head. So that is where we get the anthropometric measurement of the head. So the normal head circumference is 33 to 35 centimeters, but less than 33 could indicate microcephaly or maliit yung ulo ng bata, which can be associated with developmental delays, genetic conditions, or even maternal infections such as Zika virus. So, i-report nyo po sa doctor kung less than 33 po, kasi baka na Zika virus yung nanay or pwedeng may genetic conditions yung bata. But if the baby has more than 35 centimeters of head circumference, this may be referred as the macrocephaly, malaki yung ulo ng bata, and this could be due to hydrocephalus or excessive cerebrospinal fluid or other structural brain abnormalities. So more than 35 centimeters can also be reportable to the doctor. The next measurement that we get is the chest circumference. So the normal measurement for the chest circumference is 30 to 33 centimeters. And what is the landmark that we use? Ang ginagamit po natin, we put the tape measure on the chest of the baby above, just in the nipple line. Okay, so doon po sa may nipples natin ilalagay yung chest, paikot on the back, and ensuring that the tape measure is not too tight when you are getting the chest circumference. So ang normal is 30 to 33. Now, what happens if it is below or less than normal, less than 30? This may indicate poor growth and malnutrition, and which can also affect the lung development and breathing of the child. So report to the doctor po kung less than 30 cms po yung chest circumference, because that may be a sign of poor growth and malnutrition and may also become the reason why the baby will have difficulty of breathing. However, if the baby has more than or higher than 33 centimeters, usually it is rarely significant, but it can be associated with conditions such as affecting the body's condition. So tinatawag natin siyang pigeon chest appearance. So usually kung larger than 33, wala naman siyang masyadong clinical significance. So this can be not reported to the doctor na. The next anthropometric measurement that we should get is the abdominal circumference. So the abdominal circumference is usually 29 to 33 centimeters. That's the normal abdominal circumference. And the landmark that we use is the umbilicus or the navel. And we take the tape measure and put it snug on the abdomen, careful not to compress the abdomen while getting the measurement. So kung mas mababa po sa 29 centimeters yung nakuha mong abdominal circumference, this could suggest malnutrition and dehydration, which can also affect organ functions of the baby. Aside from that, if it is more than 33 centimeters abdominal circumference, this may indicate obesity or conditions such as organomegaly. So pwedeng may isang organ si baby na malaki or nag-enlarge because of liver diseases or possible infections. So that can be a sign na ire-report nyo po sa doctor. So the weight of the neonate normally is 2.5 to 4 kilograms. That's the normal weight of the neonate. And what we use in your birth weight is a calibrated infant scale, as you can see in the picture right now. So we have to make sure that the baby is undressed para po hindi natin nakikilo pati yung weight ng kanyang clothing. So we have to undress the baby and position the baby correctly on the scale for accurate reading. Now, if the baby has lower than 2.5 kilograms of birth weight, this may indicate low birth weight, which can lead to increased risk of complications such as respiratory distress. Mas mabilis kasing mahirapang huminga yung mga batang mababa ang kanilang birth weight. Aside from that, if the baby has low birth weight, mahihirapan din po siyang mag-establish ng breastfeeding because they will have feeding difficulties and increased susceptibility to infection. Aside from that, if the baby has more than 4 kilograms of birth weight, that could indicate macrosomia or large for gestational age, which can complicate delivery and increase the risk for postpartum complications for the mother. So pag LGA po yung bata, no, 4.5 kilos, 4.2 kilos, usually si baby, large for gestational age po siya. So ang nahirapan po doon yung nanay. Bakit? Kasi baka nahirapan siyang iluwal yung anak niya. The mother may have postpartum bleeding because of laceration and uterine atony. Okay? So you have to remember that these anthropometric measurements should need regular monitoring. Bakit po? Because this will lead to early detection of potential health issues that may be present in the baby. And any significant deviations from the normal ranges, pag may nakikita kayong mga abnormal findings, should be promptly further evaluated and reported to the doctor so that interventions will be provided. And that concludes our pre-recorded video lecture for the subject Concepts in Pediatrics on the topic Essential Intrapartal Newborn Care. Nawa ay marami kayong natutunan sa akin and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much for watching.